I hope I learned something. I hope I learned something. I hope I learned something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny days. Something. I hope you learned something from the stormy seas, from the brightest days, from the darkest nights, from the sunny
Howdy. Welcome to the daily All Hat No Kettle News Rodeo. I'm your host, Hat. Folks, I'm exhausted. Something hit me about an hour ago, like a ton of bricks. If it had happened an hour sooner, I probably would have canceled the show. I hope I can hang on. Usually the adrenaline kicks in and I feel better, but we'll have to see. We'll just have to see. Playing it by ear. But a lot going on today. I've got a big Law and Order and COVID block in the after show, and some interesting news about the border, something we've been expecting forever, since January 20th, and it's finally happened. We'll see that at the end of the show. But in the YouTube section, we've got a lot as well. The market tried to recover today. It did okay, but when you look at the numbers over the last 5 days, you can see it's still way in the tank. Bitcoin absolutely cratered over the last few hours, and Tesla, someone whose name rhymes with Jovan Husk, had something to do with it. We'll talk about that. And some news about the 2016 Trump campaign and the latest investigation to fall by the wayside. All this and more today on the Daily All Hat No Cattle News Rodeo. So first, let's get into it with our first Babylon Bee bookend. This is the one on the left. And remember, folks, I don't read these ahead of time. I pick the best headline and I go from there. So they're as fresh to me as they are to you. And this is from their finance section. Psaki reassures, quote, inflation completely under control outside of food, gas, and housing, close quote. And in case you're wondering, Jan Psaki is, of course, the arrogant, condescending, dismissive, mendacious, passive-aggressive, patronizing, self-righteous, smug, lying White House press secretary. And let's see what good old Jen had to say about what's happening at the moment. Dateline, Washington, D.C. Press Secretary Jen Psaki took time during today's briefing to address worries about inflation, comforting Americans with the news that prices are totally under control, outside of the things necessary to live. Quote, the media, you people I gave cookies to, have really blown this whole inflation thing way out of proportion. Prices have not risen in most markets, with the tiny exception of essential necessities. But prices are rock steady when you look at, for example, battleships. The same goes for cannabis, tickets to Mars, and hula hoops. There's all this talk about food and shelter when today you can still go out and buy a Rolex for the same price you could yesterday. Close quote. Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy asked Psaki how regular people struggling to buy food would be helped by more stable battleship prices. Psaki sighed deeply, then slowly growled, no more cookies. Americans still worried about basic necessities were cheered up later when they learned from New York's mayoral candidates that a house in New York only costs $50 and you can still buy a gallon of milk for one wooden nickel. The Babylon Bee, everyone, nailing it yet again. So, the market, my personal conceit. The numbers are all green except for crude oil and Bitcoin, but these are very, very deceptive. There was a huge sell-off over the last few days, and today's rebound only slightly regained those losses. The Dow and S&P 500 were both up over 1.2%. The NASDAQ could not clear a full percent gain today, closing above the 13,000 mark at just under 13,125. But at one point today, the NASDAQ was 8 points over 13,000. Almost fell below 13,000 for the first time in forever. So a very, very bad day for the NASDAQ. And I'll get into why it had such a particularly rocky day in just a moment. But first, real quickly, let's again look at the 5-day figures for the market. And you can see here the Dow, after being in record territory just 3 days ago, has absolutely cratered and barely regained some of that, but it's still well below its 35,000 mark high. The S&P 500 also, as you can see, a very large loss from highs just a week ago. And the NASDAQ has especially been hit hard. It saw major gains back on May 7th and has since fallen off the face of the earth. But if you look at the NASDAQ a bit more long-term, you can see that it actually had a record high back in April and has since collapsed. So not good at all there. Gold saw a bit of a comeback today, still well below 1840 an ounce. Crude oil actually slipped over 3.5%. It is now well below $64 per barrel. It is now at $63.75 per barrel of West Texas Intermediate Sweet Crude. And Bitcoin is flailing around like a fish on the dock right now, almost up to 49,000 at the moment, well down from its high of over 63,000 just a few short days ago. So why has the Bitcoin market and those things cratered so significantly? Well, Elon Musk had a lot to do with it. As you know, Elon Musk is kind of a trendsetter in the crypto business. Some time ago, Tesla, under his aegis, purchased almost $1.5 billion worth of Bitcoin, 1.33 billion to be exact, back in the end of the first quarter. And that is now down almost 13.5%. So Tesla has lost hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars in Bitcoin, and that's because Elon Musk won't keep his mouth shut. In fact, Tesla stock itself today fell almost 5%. below its 200-day rolling average for the first time in ages because Elon Musk won't keep his mouth shut. Now, what specifically? Well, you remember that some time ago, Elon Musk tweeted an image of the meme for Doge, the dog, the symbol for Dogecoin, which is nothing more than a meme. It's not physical, it's just a meme, but for some reason people buy it. And it shot up in value from literally hundreds of pennies to over 63 cents per Doge recently. And it had a lot to do with Elon's tweet that had the meme, and it said Doge to the moon, Dogecoin to the moon. And people bought and bought and bought, and billionaires were made. Literal billionaires were made over that. In fact, I saw a story yesterday that a very high-ranking officer at a major brokerage in the UK left just the other day, just walked away from the job, and the speculation is that because he is a Doge billionaire. Now, Doge has fallen a good 30-40% recently. I think it's now down to around 28-30 cents a Doge. But Bitcoin was doing well. It was over 63. And part of that was when Elon Musk said that Tesla was going to start accepting purchases for his vehicles via Bitcoin, making it a tangible asset. And that's one of the things that crypto has struggled with is people say, well, you can own it, but what can you do with it? Well, you could buy a Tesla with it, turns out. And some major credit card companies started offering the ability to pay your balances with cryptocurrency. And then Elon Musk hosted Saturday Night Live just this last week. And on that episode, he blasted Dogecoin. And Doge plummeted. So then, just the other day, he comes out and he says that Tesla is no longer going to be accepting Bitcoin because of the Bitcoin mining process being so heavily fueled by fossil fuels. And he said that Ethereum, or also known as Ether, things like that, were much less dependent upon heavy processing power to mine their currency. Therefore, it was more environmentally friendly. And Bitcoin cratered. And Ethereum, which had been seeing record highs, also fell a fair piece. And then some people came around and said, hey, Elon, what power sources do you use to make your cars? Do you use solely wind and solar? No. And other people asked, hey, Elon, what power sources do people use to charge their Teslas? Do they only use wind and solar? No. So it's a completely hypocritical stance on Musk's part, and he's lost a lot of value as a spokesman. And again, Tesla fell almost 5% today because basically the market's saying, where the heck are they? Because of Elon's stance, Bitcoin lost a ton of value, which means Tesla's share in Bitcoin lost a ton of value. So now their company is less valuable. So their stock is less valuable. Kind of funny how all that kicks together at the same time. I have a lot of respect for Elon Musk as an entrepreneur and as an engineer. I mean, SpaceX is an absolute miracle. He has done things for the U.S. space program that haven't been done since the 60s and 70s, and I am all for it. But he really needs to learn how to keep his mouth shut because it hurts him, it hurts his business, and it hurts other people. That's my take on it. All right, moving right along. So as I teased, there are several investigations into the 2016 Trump campaign. Some of them having to do with Russia. Now we saw yesterday that or was it Tuesday, that the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, dropped its investigation into the Stormy Daniels purported payoffs. So that fell by the wayside. And now we just found out today, this is an article from the Post Millennial, that the Federal Elections Commission has dropped their investigation into the Russian quote-unquote Trump Tower meeting. And you remember that was when Don Jr. and Paul Manafort and I believe one other person with the Trump campaign met with a Russian lawyer named Oh, I can't remember her name now. Natalia Veselnitskaya. That's it. Natalia Veselnitskaya. I can't spell it, but I can pronounce it. And she said in an email with Don Jr. that she had dirt on Hillary. And Don Jr. said, if that's true, this will be great. And they met in Trump Tower. And as soon as she sat down with a translator, she said, oh, by the way, I don't have anything on Hillary. I want you guys to come out and go against the Majinsky Act, which is, of course, an act passed by Congress that severely limits Russian adoptions of Russian children, I should say, because of their treatment of an American businessman and their killing of his Russian lawyer, whose last name was Majinsky. And it's a horrible story. You can look it up. A very, very tragic story of complete a murderous regime under Putin. That's all there is to it. They stole this businessman's assets. He's an American living. He was an American living in Russia who had a brokerage firm, and they stole his assets, stole his trademark, forged documents. His lawyer was investigating it, and they killed the lawyer. They imprisoned him and killed him while he was in jail. And it's all come out. And so Congress passed a law called the Majinsky Act that basically prohibits Americans from adopting Russian children, which was a real cash cow for Russia. And they've been fighting it ever since. And that's what Veselnitskaya wanted from the Trump administration should they take office. So the meeting was called a bust really quickly, and everybody scattered to the four winds. Interestingly enough, the same Russian lawyer met before the meeting and after the meeting with Glenn Simpson, who you may remember is the founder and co-owner of Fusion GPS, the company that was fully behind the release of the quote-unquote Steele dossier, the pack of lies that was used to create the Russia collusion narrative. Funny how that happened. But it blew up in the media. Don Jr. released all of the emails regarding it to the press. He said, I'm getting out in front of this thing before the New York Times can publish them. And he was called a traitor. People called for the death penalty against him, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the FEC just yesterday voted 3-3 to not continue the investigation. So they dropped it. That is no longer extant. There are, however, a few still sitting at the moment, although it looks like the FEC is going to drop pretty much all of them as well. And they include Trump hush money payment, quote unquote, to former Playboy model Karen McDougal, allegations that Trump illegally endorsed a super PAC, the Trump campaign's alleged investigation into Hillary's emails, and claims that the DNC solicited foreign assistance from Ukraine. I don't see any of these going anywhere, especially the one against the DNC. As you know, Hillary had a pretty massive campaign finance violation in 2016, and absolutely zero was done about that. So we'll see what happens. But as I understand right now, the FEC is split 3-3 conservative Democrat. So they need a majority to continue with a investigation. So that's why the 3-3 vote today allowed the Trump Tower investigation to be dropped. So we'll see how things go from there. I'll keep an eye on it for you, of course. So as Jen Psaki relayed to us earlier on, this news came out today. The Bureau of Labor and Statistics released the Producer Price Index for April, and demand increased 0.6%. Quoting the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, on an unadjusted basis, the final demand index moved up 6.2% for the 12 months ended in April, the largest advance since 12-month data were first calculated in November 2010. Hey, JF, very nice to see you. Yes, well, they dropped that one. We'll have to. They dropped the Trump Tower, and they dropped the Stormy Daniels. We've got those other three, I should say, to find out what they're going to do about those. But I've had pretty strong suspicion they're all going to be dropped. It's been 5 years, for crying out loud. They haven't moved on them at all. So I think just the statute of limitations is pretty much in consideration, if there is such a thing with FEC violations. But yeah, so the Producer Price Index absolutely exploded. Absolutely exploded. And if you take out foods, energy, and trade services, which, as we said in the Babylon Bee piece, are the essentials for life, the index for final demand still rose 0.7%, following an increase of 0.6% in March. For the 12 months ended in April, prices for final demand, less foods, energy, and trade services moved up 4.6%, the largest advance since 12-month data were first calculated in August 2014. Just in case you were wondering, the black unemployment rate has increased. 18,000 manufacturing jobs have been lost. We've added 0 construction jobs. Unemployment for Americans without college has increased. And women had a net loss in jobs in the report that was released last Friday. 9.8 million Americans remain unemployed. And you remember, of course, that the April jobs number missed projections by more than 700,000. And the March numbers were revised down from 916,000 to 770,000. And as I reported yesterday, meaning that the net number of people employed over the past month relative to what was known just hours ago was a mere 120,000. Inflation accelerated at its fastest pace in more than 12 years for April. The Consumer Price Index, which measures a basket of goods as well as energy and housing costs, rose 4.2% from a year ago, compared to the Dow Jones estimate for a 3.6% increase. The monthly gain was 0.8% against the expected 0.2%. So this is an absolute S show, and it's only going to get worse because we're still not getting these people back to work. Under the censorship portion of the program, you may or may not have heard, Steven Crowder's YouTube channel was hit with a second hard strike yesterday. YouTube said that their April 21st episode, where they talked about the Michaela Bryant shooting, remember the Columbus shooting, where you had a girl about to fatally stab another girl, and a police officer made a split-second decision and shot her 4 times, and she ultimately died. And let's face it, folks, those were amazing shots, because that girl was right on top of that other girl, and that officer hit no one but the target. That was just incredible. Unfortunate, but incredible shooting. But YouTube determined that the Crowder crew, my term, not theirs, was making fun of Michaela Bryant. And they have a strict policy against making fun of people who are the victims of injury or death. Of course, if you're on the left and you do that, nothing happens. There are myriad examples of that all over YouTube. But Crowder, now with a second strike, cannot upload to YouTube for 2 weeks. His Crowder Bits channel was also hit with a strike, so it can't upload for another week. And if Crowder gets a third strike within 90 days, his channel's gone. It does not exist anymore, and there are no appeals. And YouTube is hell-bent. I'm looking at you, YouTube. YouTube is hell-bent on getting rid of Steven Crowder. As you know, last year, he surpassed the Young Turks as the most watched and most subscribed news program on YouTube, a position the Turks had held for basically ever since they started. And Crowder's very proud of that, and he should be. And YouTube has done all they can to demonetize and strip his channel of any meaningful influence on the platform ever since. They have yanked live streams for no good reason, and among other really egregious actions. I fully expect some legal action to be flying out of the law offices of Bill Richmond, Steven's half-Asian lawyer. His term, not mine. And we'll see what happens. There was no show today. I looked at Blaze TV several times. There was no show, so I expect that to be Steven and Bill getting together and putting an attack plan against YouTube legal for what happened. We'll have to see how things shake out. But that is a thing right now. So if you're expecting to see Steven Crowder's channel produce any videos for the next 2 weeks, you're going to have to hold your breath. And if you're expecting Crowder Bits to show anything, that's another week. So you're going to have to find your entertainment somewhere else, I highly suggest you get a subscription to Blaze TV. It is not Glenn Beck's play toy. There are a lot of great shows on there. You don't have to watch anything that Glenn Beck has anything to do with and still enjoy the living heck out of it. Stephen Crowder's show's on there every Monday through Thursday. There's a great show called Stu Does America with Stu Bergier. An excellent show. Stu's insight and wit are quite fascinating and always entertaining and always very, very informative. There's a great daily news show called The News and Why It Matters, which I watch every day as I'm uploading these shows to Gab TV and Rumble. And of course, the channel, the show, I should say, that started the entire network back when it was called CRTV is Mark Levin's show. That's on about 3 times a week. Life, Liberty, and Levin. I'm sorry, no, that's his Fox show. I think it's just called the Mark Levin Show. But that's the thing that started this whole thing. Mark Levin is the progenitor of CRTV, and ultimately it was merged with the Glenn Beck Network and became Blaze. I wasn't happy about the name change, but that was their better marketing behind it. They figured, and they went with that. But again, don't hold Glenn Beck as the only reason not to subscribe to Blaze. It is well worth your money. Well worth your money. All right, continuing on. Okay, so the Colonial Pipeline, it's back online. I've got a story about that coming up. How did it get back online? Well, it seems that very quickly after, what's their name again? I can't remember the name of the hackers all of a sudden. DarkSide, I believe it is. But real quickly, Colonial Pipeline came up with about 5 million, not quite, in cryptocurrency and paid a ransom and to get their stuff back online. Here's the thing, though. Quite ironically, the tools that DarkSide gave to Colonial to unencrypt their data, which is what the hackers did. They put an encryption algorithm all over the Colonial Pipeline's data network, so they couldn't use it. But when they got the encryption key from DarkSide, it was so slow at unencrypting the data that Colonial wound up doing most of the effort to get back online just by installing backed up data. I really am not sure what they were thinking to not have done that in the first place. I mean, I used to be in network security, and one of my jobs was to maintain the shared drives on the network. And if I didn't get a backup right, I paid hell. I remember there were times people would come to me just absolutely crying that they had destroyed data on their system, and it was vitally important. And within 20 minutes, I had it back on their system, and they were showering me with gifts. It's my job, dude. And they'd give me spot awards and all kinds of stuff just for doing my job. They were so grateful. And Colonial had every opportunity to do the same thing. Maybe there was a lot of hardware involved too that I don't know about, but this report by the Washington Examiner says that Colonial wound up using pretty much a lot of their backup systems in order to get online quickly because the encryption stuff from DarkSide wasn't working quickly at all. But so they paid out almost 5 million in cryptocurrency. Of course, the joke's on DarkSide now because that crypto isn't worth anything near what it was when they were paid. So they, not that they lost money on the deal, but they didn't make as much as they thought they did. So the good news is then that the pipeline is producing again, is moving oil and natural gas and aviation fuel, things like that. Here's the thing, though. I didn't know this until today. That stuff moves through the pipe at about 5 miles an hour. It is not a jet stream of fuel. It is a slow-moving ball of stuff. And that has to go from Houston, where the pipeline originates, through Louisiana, Alabama, offshoots go to Florida, and then on up the East Coast up to Virginia Beach. It's going to take a while. Some people say a week, some people say 2 weeks. But it's going to take a long time just to get all of that up to those areas. Add to that the fact that you have thousands and thousands of gas stations who are empty, absolutely empty. And it's going to take a long time to get things back to some semblance of normal. So the gas lines that we've seen up to now are only going to get worse for at least the next 3 or 4 days, at least, as all of these stations run out of fuel. Some places are hit more than others. I think I've got a list here. Yes, here's a tweet from Patrick DeHaan, who's he's known as the Gas Buddy Guy. And this is a list as of 6 a.m. This morning, Central Time, of the percentage of stations without gas in the states that are supplied by the Colonial Pipeline. Hey, Dog. Very nice to see you. Great to see you. Thanks for that link, by the way, about Arizona. I'm glad you said that. Glad you came in. It reminded me. I'll do that next. So as you can see, some of these numbers are nothing. Texas, of course, isn't affected at all. Oops, excuse me. I didn't mean to do that. Nah, we're here anyway. This is easier to read. So, so some of these are well below single digits. Louisiana's also 0%. New Jersey's 1%. But some of these are massive. District of Columbia, 47%. Georgia, 49%. South Carolina, 54%. Virginia, 55%. And these are stations without gas as of 7 o'clock Eastern this morning. That stuff isn't getting there yet, folks. So it's just going to cascade. Granholm, our energy secretary, is sitting in her office just cackling with glee because she thinks that this is good for the Green New Deal. I'd like to quote Bill Whittle real quickly. Bill has said several times since this whole Green New Deal thing came up, he says, okay, you want to shut down pipelines? Okay, go ahead. Well, guess what happened? They shut down a pipeline, and the entire eastern seaboard from Virginia south, or New Jersey south, I should say, panicked. And another point that was brought up on Bill Whittle's podcast today, specifically their weekly roundup, is where are all the entrepreneurs out there trying to get capital to build solar panel and wind turbine construction factories here in the U.S.? If there's such a market for those, why aren't there U.S. people trying to get everything put together to make these? Case in point, forgive me, I can't remember the name of the country all of a sudden, but the country with the most solid and massive infrastructure of wind turbines. They're on the coast of the North Sea. It could be Norway, I'm not sure. But they have more wind turbines than anyone else, and they use that for their power more than anyone else. And they still don't have their own wind turbine factory because there's not the need. The numbers don't add up for them to make their own. That's a reality. That's a reality. And John Kerry said very recently in front of Congress that a lot of the solar panels come from China, and a lot of the ones that come from China are made in Xinjiang province and are made by Uyghur slave labor. Not to mention the strip mining of rare earth minerals. So, before I come off of this, I want to touch on something real quickly. Thanks again to Electric Dog, my technical producer and king of the links. He put a link up in the chat, in the D-Live chat earlier today when I was putting the show together, and I took a quick look at it. According to people directly involved with the Arizona Maricopa County elections audit, they're saying that several data sets of election data. Several sets of election data from Maricopa County. I'm trying to remember it. Were deleted several days before the machines were turned over to the audit. Now there is a legal term for that, when you interfere with evidence that can be used in a legal proceeding. And it is, let me scroll up here because I've forgotten it and I don't want to get it wrong. It is spoliation. Spoliation. That is not a misprint. That is the word, spoliation. And it is basically when you take evidence and you alter it or delete it or make it in such a way that it affects the legal proceeding it is supposed to be used in. So I don't have independent confirmation of this just yet. Dan Bongino did cover it on his show today. He said his sources are telling him this, but I have not seen any other news reporting on it at this moment. But the Arizona audit people are reporting this. Now, that is a direct violation of federal election law. Election records in national elections are to be kept for 22 months after the election day. 22 months. But I know this happened in a somewhat similar fashion in Michigan last year, and I've yet to hear of anyone being held to account for that. So I don't know what's going to happen in Arizona. And again, I don't know if this actually happened. I've seen 2 people report on it, including someone directly associated with the Arizona audit. So we'll have to keep an eye on it. But that's what's happening at the moment. But keep that word in mind, spoliation. All right. Oh, wait, I don't want this here. We're going to get to that later. We're going to get to that in the after show. Okay, let's dive in to international news for a moment. Of course, Israel is still under massive attack from Gaza. Over 1,000 rockets have been fired from the Gaza Strip into Israel over the last few days. Rockets being fired at Tel Aviv for the first time in years. I think since 2014. That's the first time there have been rockets fired at Tel Aviv. And remember, Israel's only a few miles across. It's a very small country. You could fit it in New Hampshire. But it is under direct attack, and it is fighting back. And the Israel government right now is fractured in one sense. They haven't been able to put together a ruling coalition for years. They've been having election after election to try and get their ruling party together. And Israel is a representative government, and it only has one legislative house, and that's the Knesset. So what happens is if your party gets 30% of the vote, and then the other 4 guys get the other 60%, all of you get seats in the Knesset, according to how many votes you got. But in order to rule, you have to have a majority in the Knesset. And Bibi Netanyahu has been the ostensible prime minister during this entire time, but he has yet to been able to put together a ruling coalition. And one of the direct competitors to him is Naftali Bennett, who's in the Yamina party. But Naftali gave an interview to Al Jazeera, I should say, and yesterday, and an article here from the Daily Wire by Tim Pierce. And Bennett told Al Jazeera that the Israeli government is united. Israel as a country is united. When you attack us, we operate as one. So they have put aside all political differences right now because they realize they're fighting for their survival. And they have no choice. So they're operating as one. And Bennett had some very, very strong words. And now, this is very, very touching. Look at this. Quoting him, "It's up to Hamas, which is an Iran-backed terror group that runs part of the Gaza Strip." Quoting again, "It's up to Hamas as long as Hamas keeps attacking Israel in order to murder Israelis across the state. By the way, Arabs and Jews alike. Hamas has already murdered 2 Arab Israelis in the city of Lod, a dad 52 years old and his daughter Nadine 16 years old, Israeli Arabs who were murdered. A Holocaust survivor, 85 years old, was murdered by Hamas in her wheelchair." He continued, "If Hamas thinks they can get away with this, they're wrong. We'll hunt down every commander, every post until we win." Al Jazeera asked about civilians dying in Gaza from Israeli airstrikes, and Bennett answered, "Indeed, Hamas killed them, because when you hide your rockets behind women and children, you are effectively murdering your own people." Continuing the quote, "We will defend ourselves, and if Hamas decides to turn schools into terror bases and hospitals in a cowardly manner into terror bases, they are responsible for murdering their own people." And there was more to the interview, including the interviewer trying to blame Israel for Gaza not having bomb shelters. And Bennett completely laid that to waste. The Gaza Strip gets billions of dollars every year from foreign aid and especially money from Iran. And they spend it on terror. They don't have any kind of a decent infrastructure in that area. Now remember, Israel used to run Gaza. And then they turned it over to the Arabs. And they turned it into a hellhole. Gaza has all the money in the world to build their own bomb shelters, build their own Iron Dome system, etc., etc. But instead they chose to buy a bunch of cheap rockets from Iran, set up launchers all over residential areas, including launching rockets from the middle of streets lined with apartment buildings. So no one's keeping Gaza from building its own defensive system. Instead, they rely on terror weapons in an offensive nature. So currently, as of this morning, the Israeli Defense Force, the IDF, has launched over 600 strikes against Palestinian terrorist units in Gaza, and they're prepping a ground war. Israel hasn't gone on the ground into Gaza in quite some time, and it was a real bloodbath. Israel tries to minimize civilian casualties as much as humanly possible. I talked yesterday about their knock bombs, or as Picasso knows calls them, knock-knock bombs, that they use to let people of buildings know that the Air Force is about to destroy those buildings, and so it gives them time to get out. They even call the people who own the buildings. They have their numbers, and they say, look, get your people out, because this building isn't going to be around come X amount of time. But Israel is doing as many surgical strikes as they can against the Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also known as PIJ. And this is a quotation from a cabinet member. "The campaign is still far from over. Whatever we don't do now, we'll have to do in 6 months or a year from now." And the defense minister, Benny Gantz, who also is up for prime minister, he ran against Netanyahu in several of these elections. But quoting Benny Gantz, "The army will continue to attack to bring a total long-term quiet. Only when we reach that goal will we be able to speak about a truce." So that is, and I have a video of there's a 2-minute video on YouTube from a gentleman named Ophir Gendelman, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, sir. But it's all about Israel mobilizing IDF forces to prepare what could be a ground war. So right now, everything's been by air, but there could be a ground war unless Hamas stops. And even then, Israel may go in to destroy these missile sites, or rocket sites, excuse me. They're not missiles, they're rockets. But I've got about a half-minute of video here. This is the Israeli Air Force prepping F-16s and F-15s that they have modified for their use to conduct airstrikes into Gaza. And if you're a military nut, you're going to know what's going on here. But you're going to see them inspecting retarded munitions and other types of ordnance to drop on these Palestinian forces. So let's play a few seconds of this. So there's a female Air Force technician tidying up a bomb. That's an Israeli Air Force F-16. They have a slightly different fuselage shape than ours. They have a larger fuel tank in the fuselage for extended operations. They don't have aerial tankers like we do. And there's IAF F-15s taking off at night. So that's going on, folks. It's a shooting war, big time. And just in case you're thinking, well, yeah, but there's a moral equivalence here, because people are dying on both sides. No. No, no, and no. Israel didn't attack first. Hamas started this whole thing. By fomenting violence at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, hard to say. Also, the most holy Jewish site, the Temple Mount, the site of the second Jewish temple, built upon the ruins of the first, built some 2,000 years ago. But when the Muslims swept through the area, they created their own mosque and declared it their holy site. And they've been fighting over it ever since. If you're a Jew and you want to pray there, you can only go on at certain times of the week, and you're under the complete watch of Arabs with automatic firearms. And there are also gangs of Arab toughs who hang around, and if they decide to, they'll start beating Israelis. So the Israeli police force is there in fairly decent numbers all the time to try and prevent these things from happening or breaking them up before somebody gets seriously hurt. So last week, during Ramadan, a bunch of Israeli Arabs and Palestinians gathered at Al-Aqsa at the Temple Mount, brought in a ton of rocks, and from an overview position started pelting the Israeli police with those rocks. So Israeli police responded with rubber bullets and tear gas, and some of these guys retreated into the mosque and were continuing to fight from inside the mosque, which is not what the Quran says you should do in a mosque. And the Israeli police ultimately locked the doors of the place to keep these guys from fighting from inside it and preventing the Israelis from responding. And they swept the place. And then all hell broke loose. Lod became, the city of Lod in southern Israel became a death camp. Arabs running all over the place, attacking Jews, burning down synagogues, burning down Jewish homes, setting dozens of cars on fire. It became a complete mess. It was a pure race war. Lod is 70% Israeli, 30% Israeli Arab. And the Israeli Arabs just went to town. And then the rockets started. Now, I had misreported earlier this week that a lot of this had to do with the what could be ultimate expulsion of Arabs from a spot in Jerusalem from homes they have held for generations, but have held illegally, since they are not the rightful owners of those properties. Those properties have been owned by Jews since the 1800s. But I mistakenly reported that was the impetus for all this, when actually it happened before that. That is part of what's going on, but it is not the main part of it. So I do apologize for that mischaracterization. Hey, Slippers. Nice to see you. It's been a long time. Al-Aqsa. Thank you, dog. Al-Aqsa. I can never get that right. Wheatmouth817 says correctly, by the way, that approximately a third of the rockets are hitting their own people. That is exactly correct. That is the number. So you're exactly correct there. But speaking of these rockets, there are multiple outlets reporting that people with the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or PIJ, which is a designated terrorist organization, I'm quoting the Daily Wire here, they are quoted in the media as saying that Iran is sending them these rockets. Not only rockets, but Iran is sending them the food that they use to break their Ramadan fast each night. Here's one clip. This is from the Middle East Media Research Institute, and it highlights remarks made from Palestinian Islamic Jihad official Ramaz al-Halabi. And just quoting a few of the things he says here. The Mujahideen in Gaza and in Lebanon use Iranian weapons to strike the Zionists. We buy our weapons with Iranian money. An important part of our activity is under the supervision of Iranian experts. The contours of the victories in Palestine as of late were outlined in the blood of Qasem Soleimani, Iranian blood. I am not sorry. I am proud to say that the rockets that are used to pound Tel Aviv have an Iranian signature on them, the signature of Qasem Soleimani. The Kornet missiles that we use to blow up the Israeli tanks are the Kornet missiles of Qasem Soleimani in Iran. The guns that we use to shoot at the Israeli enemy, those who use these guns were trained by our brothers in the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. We say this loud and clear. I ask Allah to reward Iran in my name and the Palestinian people's name. They are the ones who support us with weapons, money, and food. Folks, this is the same Iran that the current government wants to send over $250 million to in direct violation of congressional law. I don't remember if that money has been sent or not. I honestly can't remember, but I know it was the plan of this government all along to start funding the Palestinians all over again after Trump cut off the money in 2018, and rightfully so. For some reason, this administration thinks that we can go back to the old way of appeasing the Arabs in Gaza and getting them to get along with the Israelis. The Arabs in Gaza have a sole purpose of destroying Israel. It's what they live for. It's what they literally die for, is to destroy Israel. They pay families money if their kids go into Israel and kill Israelis. And if you're captured, they'll pay you money while you're in jail. And you'll be rich when you get out. And if you die, they'll pay off your family's house and give them a yearly pension. And that's coming from Iran. Gaza has no infrastructure through which to collect money. It's not like they have this thriving industrial base in Gaza. They don't. It's all coming from outside sources. And it's all being used to promote terrorism against Israel. And for some reason, our government decided that these are the people we need to get back to the table with, as opposed to doing what Trump was doing quite effectively, which is isolating Palestine, isolating Iran, and bringing the rest of the Arab world in under the tent that says we don't want Iranian hegemony in the Middle East. We don't want Iranian proxies fighting border wars with us and trying to blow up our facilities, like in Saudi, where Houthi rebels have been sending explosive-laden drones into Saudi oil facilities and taking them offline for hours at a time, interrupting the world's oil supply. And we were winning. Iran was on its knees. Their economy was circling the drain. They were trying to rely on China, buying oil surreptitiously, having tankers meet in the middle of oceans and transferring oil so the Iranian tankers couldn't be seen going into these other ports. And they kept getting caught. There were a number of tankers that we intercepted in the Caribbean on their way to Venezuela. I think there were 4 tankers we intercepted a couple years ago. But this administration says, no, we're going to get back into talks with Iran. We're going to bring the JCPOA back because it was such a great deal for us. We're going to ignore the fact that Iran has gotten their uranium enrichment up to over 60% now. We're going to ignore all that. We're going to go back to all the things that have been failing us for the last 40 years. Electric Dog says, we got to stop the 4 to 8 year Jekyll and Hyde thing America keeps doing. Any ideas? I do actually have an idea, Dog, and that is to go to a representational system of government instead of a two-party system. I think we should do it like Britain and Israel does it, where you have to put together a ruling majority in both houses and the White House in order to have a mandate. That would take care of it. That would take care of it. Because then you would have to get the will of the people behind you in order to rule effectively. That's how I see it. I don't think it would ever happen. America is married to the two-party system. It's in the Constitution, if I'm not mistaken. And if it's not, I'd be surprised. But I don't see us doing it. But basically a parliament. Yeah, Dog, basically a parliament. Yeah, I think we should keep the two houses. I think we should keep the Senate and the House because remember, England has the Commons and the House of Lords. But I think we should go to a parliamentary system of representation. That's the word I wanted. Thank you, Dog. That's exactly what I wanted. Thank you. Okay, one last piece, and we'll be done with the YouTube section. France has been seeing a ton of Islamic terrorism for years now. Absolute years. Oh, Dog says the Constitution does not mention political parties. Thank you, Dog. I appreciate it. Thank you. I knew I was probably wrong on that, but you know me. I'll always stick by my failing memories if it actually works. Thank you again. But France has been seeing all kinds of Islamic terrorism for years now. And French lawmakers have been trying to downplay the unrest that you're seeing. I mean, cities like Paris have fallen into complete ruin. You can't walk through certain areas of Paris anymore without getting attacked, especially if you're Jewish. If you dare wear a yarmulke or a Star of David in Paris, you're going to wind up getting attacked more often than not. In fact, French lawmakers have said on the sly to French Jews, maybe you shouldn't wear those things in public. Just saying. Just saying. So there was a letter published Sunday by 2,000 active duty French soldiers and a number of retired military commanders, and they're warning that there could be a civil war breaking out in France between the Islamists and French nationals. And the French government is blowing it off. They're saying such things as it's a waste of time, offers no solution. Others have accused the group of using the far right's rhetoric. Another French party leader said that these are mutinous and cowardly. Now, interestingly enough, Marine Le Pen, who is the leader of the French National Rally Party, the far right, I should say far right as far as France is concerned. They're a nationalist party. But Marine Le Pen has come out in favor of this. But let me quote real quickly. Le Pen called the letter a, quote, lucid look at the state of France. That's according to Bloomberg. The Sunday letter compared France's current approach to Islamism today to France's approach to the Nazis in the 1940s, when France abandoned, quote, without reacting, entire neighborhoods of our country to the law of the strongest, close quote. Continuing a quote from the letter, many of us have suffered enemy fire. Many have offered their lives to destroy the Islamism to which you are making concessions on our soil. We have seen the abandoned suburbs with our own eyes. We have endured attempts to exploit religious communities, for which France means nothing, is nothing but the object of sarcasm, contempt, and hatred. We marched on July 14th, I believe that's Bastille Day. We see communitarianism taking hold in the public space, in the public debate. We see the hatred of France and her story becoming the norm. So, this is France, folks. And as you know, Macron has horrible approval ratings. He has for over a year now. I mean, the last I saw, they were in the 30s. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see. I'll certainly keep an eye on this. But that's what's going on at the moment in France. All right, we have reached the end of the YouTube program. Actually got out of it on time for a change. I want to thank YouTube folks for being here as always. I will be back tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern. However, oh, wait a minute. I'm trying to remember the plan I came up with about an hour and a half ago. I have an appointment tomorrow afternoon in the early evening that I have to get out of here in time to do. And if I do a full show, I'm not going to be able to make it and get my uploads done at the same time. I'm thinking on the fly here, folks. I really am. So what I'm going to have to do is only do a half hour on YouTube tomorrow. So I'll start at the regular time, 4 o'clock Eastern, but we're only going to go to 4:30. Then I'm going to do the after show for another hour. So I'll get out of here at 4:30 Eastern as opposed to 5 that I normally do. So tomorrow's show is only going to be an hour and a half. YouTube gets the first half hour, and then Trovo and DLive get the next hour, and I'm going to leave at 4:30 Eastern. That way I can get my uploads to Gab TV and Rumble done and make my appointment with time to spare. That's the only way I can make it all work. And I have commitments to Gab TV and to Rumble that I can't blow off. So that's the only way I can think of it to work. So you get half a show today, half a show tomorrow, YouTube. I apologize, but next Monday we'll do a full day. A week from tomorrow, there will not be a show. I'm getting jaw surgery Friday morning. I do expect to be back a week from Monday, though. So that's the plan, folks. I'm sorry to spring it on you at the last minute, but I honestly just thought of it about 2 hours ago that I can't make it all work. My memory is such that these things don't come to me until the last minute. So bye-bye, YouTube. I'll see you tomorrow. Sorry, it's only going to be a half hour. I hope you don't mind too much. All right.